Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to see you. This is the Business Growth Multiplier. I am really excited to be here. My name is Mark Dolfini. If you have been to this training before, it is going to be a little different, but it is always similar, but not exactly the same. So it's good to see you. If you are here, I would love to hear where you are from and what business that you're in. So it's good to see you, and looking forward to connecting with you today. Just a couple of quick housekeeping items. If you are, this is going to be about an hour. And if you are having some other things going on in the background, I would recommend as best as you can. I get it. Many of you are business owners. You have 100 things going on. And of course, probably something that blew up 3 minutes before this was supposed to start. So if that is the case, do the best you can. Try not to multitask, and just again, take as many notes as you possibly can. There will be a replay on this. We'll send this back out. Welcome, Lauren from Galveston, Texas. I know you, Lauren's helping me out here, and she's sharing a little bit about herself on there. So thank you, Lauren. All right, without any further delay, let's go ahead and get started. So let me go ahead and share my screen. There you go. So this is the Business Growth Multiplier, and this is a strategic approach to managing your life and your business. So I want you to think about this really quick about who specifically this is for. This really is for established business owners. And could it be for solopreneurs or someone who's maybe just getting started? It is, but I just want to make sure that you understand that this really is not meant for the solopreneur or the one-man army. Where are my one-man army people out there, right? Where it's all you're doing all from soup to nuts, you're doing everything. That's fine. But if you are fine with that and you want to stay that way, I'm just going to be honest with you, this training really isn't for you. There's no disrespect. I did that for years. I was totally fine with businesses where I was the one-man show. And that is just not this, because the reality is what we're trying to talk about here is we're trying to scale and we're trying to grow. And to do that quickly, you're going to need to bring others on board. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're bringing in employees, but it does mean that you are bringing in other people to help. And that could be contractors, it could be other people. But just letting you know, I fought this for years, and I became bottlenecked when I tried to do everything myself. Not that you can't do everything, but the reality is you can only do one thing at a time. And when you have others in your organization, you can now get multiple things done at a time. And bringing others into your organization has a scaling effect on the business, just the way it is. So let's talk about today's presentation. First and foremost, we're going to talk about the systems. And this is nothing profound, right? The systems is what many business owners are looking for. They're looking for the systems and the processes. And this is the frame that we're going to talk about to get your best business and your best life. Then we're going to talk about the people that you need and lessons on leadership and management that I have experienced. And I didn't always get this part right. So just lessons on leadership and management that you will need for your business. Third, we're going to talk about the 4 core functions that is true in every single business. And you have to have all 4 core functions, or it just simply doesn't work. It's not a business, not a true business. Number 4 is let's get set to scale, and let's make that growth something that is controlled and something that is not going to metastasize into something else. And then number 5, we're going to talk about different resources that will set you up for success beyond today. So this is what we're talking about here is a business approach. And we're talking about the difference between systems versus what is social. We're talking about the difference between processes versus people. And first and foremost, we're going to start on the systematic and the process side. And then we'll go over to the social and people side here later on. So let's talk about the systems. Everything that I'm going to be talking about in the systems is what I talked about in the Time Wealthy Advantage. Now, if you would like a copy of the Time Wealthy Advantage, you can go onto Amazon. Please don't do that right now. We'll give you an opportunity to do that here in a little bit. However, if you would like to pay less for something and get more, then pay attention to this. So if you'd like a signed copy and you'd like me to sign it with your name, my initials, and sign it directly over to you, I can do that. I can send you a signed copy, and I can do it for cheaper than Amazon. And I will also give you a bonus one-to-one coaching session in addition to that. And we can really talk about really whatever it is that you want to talk about. It will be a 30-minute session entirely for you. So let's get into, we'll pull up a link at the end in terms of how you can do that and how you can get the book sent directly to you. And that is for people in the United States. If you are interested in the Viper method, that's everything that I talked about in the book. And we're going to go through this right now. Viper method is an acronym that stands for vision, infrastructure, process, execution, and reporting. So that's the methodology that we're going to be taking that is discussed in the Time Wealthy Advantage. So let's talk about, first and foremost, let's talk about vision. Vision has two components. Vision has the personal vision component and the business vision component. So when it comes to personal vision, it asks a very simple question of where do you want to go? Where do you want to go? When you're asking the question around business vision, it's going to be, great, where do you want to go? Now the business vision is going to ask, okay, how are we going to get there? So this is where I want you to start thinking about personal vision first versus business vision. And many business owners who I talk to and have conversations with along the way, I'll ask them, do you have a vision that you're trying to achieve? And I will ask the question vague on purpose. And the reason I'll ask the question vague on purpose is because they can answer it any way they want. They can answer it in a personal vision context. They can answer it in a business vision context. It's up to them. So many times they will answer it in a business vision context. Well, I want to hit 10 million in sales. I really want to get 1,000 new clients. I want to get 10,000 new widgets produced, whatever. And that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem is that's not a personal vision. And I will tell you that the personal vision is what exists for the business vision. The business vision, for example, let me say, I said that backwards. Business vision actually exists to serve the personal vision. Because the danger in creating a business vision without creating or considering a personal vision is that you end up creating a life that exists to serve the business. Let me say that one more time. The danger in creating a personal vision, sorry, let me get my slide there right. The danger in creating a business vision before you create a personal vision is that you end up creating a life that exists to serve the business. And I'm just telling you, that's how people end up with businesses that they can never fire themselves from. This is how people end up with jobs that they can never leave. And this is a danger. So when you've created this personal vision, the personal vision exists because of the business vision. The business vision exists to serve the personal vision, and it delivers that. So when just a real quick thing that I talk about all the time when people are trying to consider their personal vision is the 100th birthday speech, right? You're turning 100 years old. Great. I want you to think about that. I want you to think about who would you want to be there? Who would you want to be in the room? What would you say during your 100th birthday speech? Think about what you would want others to say to you when you were done speaking. And then finally, all right, great. What is the message that you would like them to carry outside the room after you were done speaking? Right? So this is really, really important to have the personal vision very well defined so that all the decisions that are made are run through the lens of your business vision and your personal vision, because everything exists to serve your personal vision. Again, we don't want to create a job for ourselves. We don't want a business where we can never leave, where we could never sell, because the reality is that when you have a business, and let's just say for argument's sake that you did want to create a business that you wanted to sell as you headed off into the sunset into retirement, you're right. Maybe you're like, well, I don't ever want to retire. Okay, right. But your business is not worth very much at all. It's not saleable the more you have to be involved as the business owner. That's just the reality. Because if I come in and I want to make an offer to someone for their business and I want to make a $3 million offer, and then I find out that the only way this works is to keep the business owner in as a main cog in the wheel, that business is worth vastly less. Because what happens if that person dies? That person is not going to be nearly as vested once they get $3 million in their bank account. They're just not. I mean, it's not their business anymore. Why would they care as much? So this is why it's really important to start to consider your personal vision in the context and in concert with your business vision. So that's your personal vision. So we talked about personal vision. We talked about business vision. Now, we didn't really define business vision, but when you're thinking about your business vision, you want to think of it in the context of 3 C's. three C's. You want to think of it in terms of core purpose, core values, and client avatar. Core purpose, core values, and client avatar. So the three C's of business vision, if we're going to go back to main questions, what are the main questions and the purposes behind the things that define business vision? Let's look at core purpose. And specifically, if you're going to ask a question around core purpose, it's okay, well, what business are you actually in? And what problems do you really solve? And I really would invite you to be very specific when you're defining core purpose. Now, let me just be clear on this. Defining the core purpose is not just some academic exercise. And that's really important to think about here for just a hot second, because when I got into a conversation with a guy today who is in multiple businesses and none of them are even remotely related to one another. And guess what? He was absolutely swamped. He had 92 different things going on at any one given time. And it was really hard to nail him down to a different time where he and I could just even talk. He wants to hire me. I know he does. But the reality is, I'm thinking, when are you actually thinking you're going to use, when you think that we can actually have conversations where you're actually able to slow down and actually be strategic and engage in some strategic planning and not only engage in strategic planning, but in strategic execution? When do you think that that's going to happen? Because again, he was so tactically busy running from one thing and running to the other thing. Strategy takes time. And that will be my next question when he and I have a conversation about, okay, well, really and truly, what business are you in and what problems do you solve? And it's really important that you be highly specific in your answers. If you just say, well, I'm in real estate, or I'm in IT services, or I'm in the restaurant industry, that's not specific enough. You really need to be really specific in terms of what business that you're in and what problems do you solve. And it'll make more sense here in just a second when we talk about client avatar. But before we do that, let's talk about the second C of business vision, and that's core values. What matters to you about this business, and how would the world be worse off if you went out of business? If you were no longer in business, how would this matter? And keep in mind that your business core values are just an extension of your core values. And this is really important, especially when it comes to defining your company culture and the DNA of your organization. Because when you are getting really clear about sorry, my thing is not, okay, there we go. When you're really clear about what it is that you stand for, you're starting to define the DNA of your organization. And that's really, really important. When you define the organizational DNA and the organizational culture, and you do that through a well-defined set of core values, this is why this is so important. Because if you don't do this, what ends up happening is, and I have experienced this not only in my own businesses, but I've experienced it in many businesses that I go into, whether it's banks, whether it's retail, whether it's it doesn't really matter. Whatever business you want, you can pick the industry. But when you go into an organization that does not have a defined set of core values, the company culture is defined by the people with the strongest personalities that are in the room. Think about that. And if those set of personalities don't represent your core values, what's going to happen when that person needs to be fired? What happens when that person, or what happens when you would just want to go on vacation? What happens when you're just not around? What happens when you go to lunch? What's being spread around in your organization by the strongest personalities that are in the room? It's kind of dangerous. And when that person leaves, and that might be you, but that leaves a void. It leaves a vacuum. And unfortunately, that's the leadership challenge that many business owners are experiencing. And they're like, man, why can't I get my people to just show up on time? Why can't I get my people to care? It's because of this. It's because of the culture, and it's because of leadership. And you may not necessarily want to hear that, but this is the reality. This is the truth. Because people will come in to good organizations. They will come in because there's good systems. They'll come in because good business is being done, but they will leave bad managers. And the reality is, people don't want to be managed. They do want to be led. So this is why core values matters so much, is because it helps define it helps define the true north for your managers and your leaders to make decisions by when you're not around. So take the time to define those core values. Lastly, We started talking about the core purpose. We talked about core values. Now let's talk about client avatar. The client avatar is specifically who you want to serve. Who do you want to serve? And what are their geographics? What are their demographics? And what are their psychographics? The geographics are just simply, these are straightforward, right? Geographics are where they are. The demographics are who they are. And the psychographics is how crazy they are, right? No, the psychographics is how they think, right? Where they are, who they are, and how they think. So when you start thinking about how they think of Aaliyah, think of their attitudes, think of their lifestyles, think of their interests, and think of their aspirations. So when you start to think of their psychographics, this is the reasons why they will buy from you. And you really want to get very, very clear on your client avatar, because it's very easy to sell to anyone. It's very difficult to sell to everyone. And you'll notice that in your lead generation, that when you're trying to have a conversation with 3 or 4 different people at a time, it gets very watered down and it gets very generic, and people just won't buy. People just won't even raise their hand. So we'll have to land the plane here in terms of business vision. There's so much more that I can unpack, and there's a lot more that's unpacked in the book. But the 3 C's of business vision: core purpose, core values, and client avatar, these are really, really important when you look at the when your business vision. So we're just wrapping this up. We talked about personal vision, we talked about business vision, and you might be thinking, okay, well, this is great. I understand that personal vision is really important, and what am I supposed to do with all these different ideas that I have in my head? Well, the thing is, it's like you really want to get clear about having some timelines. Now, I'm just going to go through this really quickly about, I like having like a 36-month business vision timeline, and maybe like a 1-year business vision timeline, but I don't go beyond 3 years. And the reason why I don't go beyond 36 months is because realistically, there's just too many variables. But what I'll do is I'll break that down between 36 months to 12 months. And then I break those 12 months down into 90-day projects, monthly goals, weekly goals, and I refer to something known as the daily 5. The daily 5 are the maximum of 5 things that I will do every single day that will move that'll move the needle towards my goals, that will move the needles towards my actual vision. So when I'm talking about that specifically, I want to make sure I'm really, really specific about the things that I'm going to do that are going to move the needle towards my goals. If I am, let's say for argument's sake, I got this, is anybody out there that has that to-do list of 37 items, right? That you're going to try to get done today, right? And what happens when you have that to-do list of 37 items? You do the most inane thing that's on there, right? The thing that's the easiest. When in reality, the things that are going to move the needle the most, realistically, if you're trying to grow your organization, it should be specific items directed towards lead generation and finding leads and working those leads. That's the thing that's going to grow your business the most. Most people, they get hung up in too much in operations, and because they get so operationally heavy and operationally focused, they get top heavy, or they get bottom heavy, and they really can't get out of their own way because they're just so worried about fulfillment, when in reality, they really need more leads. So I just want to make sure that you understand, we're going to come back to the daily 5, and the daily 5 are up to 5 specific things that you're going to do every day that are going to move the needle towards your personal and business vision, towards your goals, towards the goals that are going to be in alignment with that personal business vision. So we talked about vision. Now let's start to talk a little bit about infrastructure. Now, when we talk about infrastructure, this is just the basics of the business. It's the bones of the business. It's the desks, it's the chairs, it's the computers and phones and software and websites and all these different things, all these management systems that come into place that you need to run your business. And keep in mind, you might think, well, then why does vision come first? Why shouldn't we be considering infrastructure if it's so important? Well, the reality is that when you have vision, the reason that vision has to come first is because, hit the wrong button. The reason that vision has to come first is because when you create a vision, your vision might be to lay on the beach rubbing cocoa butter on your belly for 2 months out of the year. Well, if you create an infrastructure that's designed or requires you to return emails and phone calls in a very short manner, very short timeline, that's going to be a terrible experience for you when you're trying to lay on the beach rubbing cocoa butter on your belly for 2 months out of the year, right? So you have to consider the vision and then the infrastructure, and you're going to design the infrastructure that's in alignment with that vision. So let's talk about first we talked about vision, then we talked about infrastructure. Now let's talk about process. Process is simply how you do stuff. And there's two components to process. There are the tactical components and there are the strategic components. Let's first talk about tactical. When you're talking about tactical, the tactical process is just simply how you do stuff. It's your standard operating procedures. Like if you were in the military, you'd understand it's basically how you do things from day to day. It's your checklists, right? It's basically how you do things in your day-to-day activities. It's your opening procedures, your closing procedures, how you prepare bank deposits, how you answer the phone, things like that. So those are all tactical day-to-day processes. Now, I want to make a quick point about this, is that we talked about infrastructure and process, specifically infrastructure and tactical process, and just simply how you do stuff every day. That little box that I just drew around infrastructure and tactical process, that's the systems part of the business. It's really no more complex than that. It's infrastructure and process. Now, everything outside of that is the human component, and everything will run on that process and infrastructure that you created that all stays in alignment with your vision for the future. However, there's another component to process, and that's the strategic planning piece. So let's talk about, sorry, I keep hitting the wrong button here. Strategic planning involves people, purpose, and promotion. People, purpose, and promotion. Now, I don't have time to unpack these really at a super deep level, but when you're looking at the people, those are the people that you're going to need to execute your strategic plan. Think of, like, in this particular metaphor, you have, with the infrastructure and process, up to this point, you have built a warship. You built a battleship. And now you want to take that battleship out of the harbor. That's what strategic planning does. And strategic planning is like, okay, cool, we've got this awesome system. Now we want to go out there and make some trouble, right? We want to go mix it up. We want to let the world know that we exist. We want to get people out there that are going to help us execute our strategic plan. What is the purpose of our strategic plan? The purpose might be to gain market share. It might be to launch a new product or a service. It might be to enter a new market entirely, right? Maybe it's for misinformation, right? To kind of throw your competitors off, which you have to be careful about that. But the strategic planning is really, really important in terms of people, the purpose, and then the promotion. Every plan has to have a promotion piece. Now, when I say promotion, let me be clear about this. The promotion piece is really about, it's kind of the communication that happens outwardly and inwardly. So it's communication that happens within your own organization, and it's communication that happens outside your organization. I consider that promotion. So you have to promote your strategic plan, and you also have to talk about it a lot, not just with the people inside your organization, but also people outside your organization. And when it comes to lead generation, the lead generation function is one of the 4 core functions of business. The lead generation function requires a lot of attention. It's like kind of like being out on the beach on a very hot, sunny day. You need to reapply sunscreen often, right? So you have to think about that when, in terms of the promotion piece. You just can't get away with it. You just cannot mail that in. You have to be very consistent with that. So when it comes to process, we talked about tactical, we talked about strategic. Right now, that's in the context of the Viper method, we talked about vision, we talked infrastructure, we talked process. Now let's talk about execution. The reason execution is so important, and the reason why I've given it its own line item in the Viper method, is because many good plans fall apart in execution. General Patton had said this: a good plan violently executed now is better than the perfect plan executed next week. So you can't wait for perfect. That's why, I don't know if you've ever heard of the phrase taking imperfect action. Don't wait for it to be perfect, because conditions are never right. You just go with it, and you just keep going with it until it stops making sense to go with it. And the reality is that most plans will fall apart in execution, because if you're looking at the multitude of things that any business owner has to do at any given time, is they're doing a lot of very urgent things, but things that aren't necessarily important. And this is where having too many priorities has the same impact as having no priorities. That's why when I was asking those of you, and if I had a third hand, I'd put it up as well. There are times I have to be really careful about creating that to-do list that has 71 different items on there. Because again, having a list with too many priorities has the same impact as having none. So when you're thinking about this, this is why when we were talking about the daily 5 earlier, this is the daily 5 are the 5 very specific things that you're going to do every day that are going to move the needle towards your personal vision or towards your business vision. It can be personal vision or business vision, either one. But the daily 5 are up to 5 very specific actions that you can take that are going to move the needle towards that. Does it mean that you only have 5 things to do every day that day? No, of course not. But it does mean that you have defined those 5 things in terms of what they are, and getting those things identified, getting them done, carving out the time on your to-do list, and then get to the other things. But get these things done. Make sure that you're moving the needle towards your strategic plan, your business vision, and of course, ultimately your personal vision. I would also recommend that you have an accountability partner, which different studies, depending on what you've looked at, it actually increases your rate of success by 600% and sometimes more, depending on which study that you read. So having an accountability partner definitely helps. And that's where a coach could come into place. That's where a consultant can come into place. That's where a business partner can come into place. I would recommend it be anybody but your spouse, right? Unless, even if they are in business with you, my recommendation is get it someone other than your spouse, because it really does. Again, unless it really works for you, but my recommendation is always to have it someone else than that. So let's talk about the R in the Viper method, which is the reporting function. The reporting function just lets us know what happened. It lets us know specifically between lead metrics and lag metrics. And lead metrics are just simply based on the actions and activities. Like, this is what we did. The lead metrics are going to represent the actions that we took. I sent out 50 emails today. I mailed out 500 direct mail letters or direct mail pieces. I made 75 cold calls. Those are very specific lead metrics. Now, they don't have to be entirely around lead generation. I'm just using those as an example. But if you're trying to grow the business, which is the point of this whole endeavor here, this is the business growth multiplier, then they should be around lead generation. But if they're not, maybe you have another needle moving activity that needs to be on there, fine. But it should have very specific metrics, and they have to be measurable. If they're not measured, they cannot be managed. So the lead metrics are based on your actions and activities. Your lag metrics are the results of those actions and activities. So when you're looking at your results, the results are basically just the reports of everything that happened. So you're like, oh, all right, cool. I got a new client this week and he paid $35,000 or paid $1,500 or paid $35, whatever. Now you have lag metrics, and lag metrics are things that you don't have direct control over. You do, however, have direct control over your actions and activities, right? But you don't have direct control over your lag metrics. You can't put a gun to someone's head to make them buy. So that's why it's good to track both lead metrics and lag metrics, because if you don't see the results you want, you really just have to adjust your actions and activities. So when you're looking at the Viper method, this is everything in a nutshell. We talked about the systems piece. Now let's talk a little bit about the people. Now, this is going to be just a fast lessons on leadership and management. Now, the systems are important, but the reality is systems are only going to get you so far, because systems, they offer stability, they offer consistency, they certainly offer some measure of accountability, but they are very limited when it comes to making subjective decisions, adapting to market changes, especially when those changes are very, very rapid. It's very difficult to rely on a system that way. They are not great at coming up with creative solutions. They're great at doing the same thing over and over and over and being consistent, but coming up with creative solutions is not the design of a system. And also establishing and maintaining human connections. Human connections. I'm not talking about the automated email. I'm talking about the phone call where someone says, hey man, I saw on social media that you got married. I just wanted to give you a quick call and say congratulations. Right? That's the human connection. That's something that AI is not going to be able to replicate. The business approach We talked about the systematic process. Now we're going to talk about the social side of things. We're going to talk about the people. And this is where I talk about the 3 pillars model of leadership that I teach. This is all related around trust, vision, and communication. I have spent a tremendous amount of time studying leadership. And there's 2 main components, 2 main legs that I teach on: the systems piece and the leadership piece, the social piece. This is so important that all of the leadership traits and skills and everything else will fall into these 3 buckets around trust, around vision, and around communication. Are there more? Of course, there's other things, but these 3, everything that I have studied falls into these 3 buckets around trust, around vision, around communication. These are 3 pillars that must exist in order for a leader to be truly effective. If they only have 2 out of the 3, people may trust you, but if you cannot communicate a vision because you're a horrible communicator or you don't have a vision, they're not going to follow you for very long. You're really just going for a walk. If you have a vision and you're a great orator, but people don't trust you, they're not going to follow you, especially if they don't trust you. They may follow you out of morbid curiosity, or they may follow you because they have to. But that's when you're going to get people who show up, do the bare minimum, and then leave early. You're trying to get people like that to do more than asked can be extremely challenging. So when you have trust and vision, but you don't have good communication skills, you're not going to be able to articulate what it is that you actually need. And people, again, will not follow you. So all 3 of these elements are really, really critical, and you must have all 3. So why is leadership? Well, I'm writing a book right now called Leader Boss. And I finished The Time Wealth, The Advantage. In chapter 19, the last chapter of that book, it made me realize that, yes, systems are very important, but you do need to consider the human component. You do need to consider the human aspect. And when I'm the leader boss, this is where people are relying on title versus relying on authority. And when you have a person who is relying on title, that's when, like, you follow me. Hey, you do what I told you to do because I'm the boss. That's when someone who is relying on title. But when people are able to lean back on their authority, it's because of what you've done for them. It's because of how you have treated them. It's because of how you've made them feel. It's because how you've empowered them and how much they feel like they are valued within your organization, and how much value that they have as an individual. This was really done well by John Maxwell when he went through the 5 different levels of leadership, starting with positional leaders. That's the type of leader who relies on their position, who is, hey, basically, you follow me because I say so. The permissional leader, people will follow you because they want to. The productional leader, this is people will follow them because of what they've done, not only for them, but also for the organization. The developmental leader is people will follow them because of how you are pouring into them. And because now you're creating leaders. Now this is a leader who's creating other leaders. And the level 5 leader is someone who's basically people are going to follow them out of reputation. So there's another component to this, is that, and for those of you who maybe know the DISC personality matrix, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but this is really, really fascinating, where there was another group of researchers that had taken the DISC personality matrix. Now, if you're not familiar with it, the people at the top of the matrix are big picture, at the bottom are into details. The people on the right side are motivated by people and relationships, and the people on the left side are motivated by things. So for those of you who may be familiar with this, you've got the dominant type, the interpersonal type, the steady relator, and then the conscientious. So as you're looking at this, the dominant type are very big picture and into things. The steady relators, they're very much into people and details, and so forth and so on. So it's interesting, if I kind of break this into a circle and then take that circle and carve it up into like a pizza, right? Now you have these 8 different personality profiles that show up. Now I'll just stop here at these first 4, because it's really fascinating. When I looked at this from the pioneering leader at the top, these are people who have a very strong action bias, who can often take action very quickly on very little data. These are the types of people who generally jump out of the airplane and build the parachute on the way down, right? Anybody know anyone like that? And that's great. And they can be very, very persuasive. But the problem is that the pioneering leader often gives these big motivational speeches, and then they leave very little on the back end. And that can be very challenging because people are feeling unsupported and they're like, yeah, he gave this big motivational speech, but where is he now? Where is she now? The humble leader, on the other hand, that's the person on the south end of the disc matrix. They are great with systems. They're great with routines. But guess what? They don't tend to take action very good. They tend to think about things, and they can be kind of into people pleasing. They're very reliable, which is great. And they certainly like their routines and their systems and their processes. But as a result, they often take forever to move on something. And they tend to adopt the, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality, which can really close them off to new ideas. And it can leave them very vulnerable to changes in the market, especially if those changes are very rapid. Let's take a look at the affirming type of leader on the right-hand side. The affirming leader are amazing. As we mentioned before, they are very people-oriented, just like the disc matrix suggests. And they're amazing collaborators. And they're warm, and they do really well at making everyone feeling, warm and fuzzy, but, which also makes them extremely approachable. But they also have an aversion for conflict because they're so warm and they love their people and everything else, right? So they tend to avoid tough conversations. They're more relationship oriented than results oriented. So they don't tend to see the inefficiencies, or they don't necessarily want to see them, because a lot of times they represent the people that they really like, and that can be tough for them. So when you're looking at the resolute leader on the left, I think I popped open a few more there. Here, I'll click it. The resolute leader on the western edge, these are very strong-willed and persistent. They tend to give others courage in tough times. They kind of speak their mind. They love to debate. They love to solve problems. And they're very driven towards personal mastery. And, it's generally with folks like this, everyone starts out at a 1 when it comes to their trust, and they're just naturally skeptical. So they have a strong opinion of how things should work. And, they love to solve problems, but the problem is they tend to do their work on their own, and they don't like to collaborate. They don't like to bring anybody else in on the work. So is any one of these better or worse? It's situational. If you drive up on a car wreck, you might want someone who's more of a commanding type leader that says, you call 911, you direct traffic, you and me, let's go help the people who are injured in the car wreck, right? That's the type of leader that you would need. On the other hand, you would not want an inclusive type leader that might say, well, let's all get together and think about what we should do, and let's all talk about our feelings. It's not going to work, not in that situation. Maybe an hour afterwards, that might make sense, but that's not exactly what is needed during that period of time. So I just want you to consider that the best approach is a multidimensional approach, where you might naturally be a commanding type leader, but recognize that there are elements of being an inclusive leader that will make you more effective. And you might be thinking, well, this is all warm and cozy stuff, but does leadership absolutely matter? Well, let me make a point in terms of why leadership does matter. When in the context of leader boss, I make a point around people who are caring versus people who have candor. Now, I'm talking about people like, again, when a lot of people like, well, and I'll hear this a lot with bosses that say, man, I'd love to be a good boss, but every time I'm nice to these people, they walk all over me. Or, man, if I don't enforce the rules, they're just going to, if they give them an inch, they're going to take a mile. And I do believe that candor and caring need to be applied in equal amounts. The reason for that is because if you have too much caring, people will walk all over you. And if you have too much candor, people will consider you to be a tyrant, and it's going to be really hard to get them to do anything. So you have to have I believe, an equal mix of both caring and candor. And it was interesting because level 5 leadership, and this was actually a study that had been done by Jim Collins in several different books that he's written. One was Good to Great. The other one was Great by Choice. Both really, really good books. But he talked about how companies with level 5 leaders and really good leaders are significantly more profitable. They grew much, much faster. They had a much stronger company culture, and they were driven by a defined set of core values. And these were companies that, companies like Amgen and Intel, Microsoft, and Southwest Airlines, when they compared those companies to companies like Genentech and AMD and Advanced Micro Devices, Apple and Pacific Southwest. Now, Apple This is back during a time when things were horrendous at Apple and not great. But let me just make a point here in terms of look at those first 4 companies on the left-hand side: Amgen, Intel, Microsoft, and Southwest. I want to make a point of how much more profitable they were compared to the market, the overall market, and versus their own industry. So in Amgen's case, they made a return over 30 years, 24 times more than the market. So if you invested $10,000 in the general market, like in the stock market, right, a broad index fund, versus Amgen, you would have made 24 times more money. Think about that for a second. And in the industry, you made 77 more times if you went versus just as an index or an industry fund. If you were in Intel, which is, they were obviously the microchips, 20 times the market versus 46 times the industry. And I'm not talking 46%. I'm talking about 46 times, multiple. If you're talking about Microsoft, 56 times the market, 119 times the industry. And Southwest Airlines, which was unbelievable, where they made 63 times more money in the market and 550 times the airline industry. So when you consider the 100 best places to work, the list that's published by Forbes every year, these companies frequently represent the highest stock returns. So leadership makes a huge difference. And growth requires change. And because growth requires change, leadership is what manages that change. So how do I get people to care as much as I do? I feel like I should be further along in my business. I hear that all the time. And the reality is that growth requires change, and leadership is what manages that change. So if you want to be further along, you have to start to consider both your systems and your processes and the social aspect and your people. And that's how you set yourself up from a strategic perspective. So let's talk about the 4 core functions. And these have to be true in every business. So the 4 core functions in every business are lead generation, sales, operations, and accounting. And the customer's journey happens in that order. They are coming to you because of your lead generation. You're continuing on the conversation from the lead generation piece to the sales piece. That's why they're having the conversation with you. Then the operations and fulfillment, whatever the fulfillment piece is, that's why you're in business. That's what you do. And then finally, the accounting function. This is where the money comes in and money changes hands. Money comes in, bills get paid. So those are the 4 core functions. When you're looking at this, where you're trying to scale and you want to have controlled growth, this is where you have to stop and consider your lead generation. This is everything that's going to matter. Now, I have an entire training just around lead generation. Lauren, if you wouldn't mind, share that link for the lead generation class on Wednesday. Or if you'd actually just want to share the overall Eventbrite link, you can see what else is out there. I think that's the only one that's coming up right now on lead generation. But this is where you're targeting your specific client avatar. And I know exactly who I want to work with. And because I know exactly who I want to work with, it is significantly easier for me to direct my marketing. And, I get the clients with the most amount of money who bring me the least amount of drama. I don't know about you guys, but man, I am all about the least amount of drama in my life at this juncture. So thank you, Lauren. So click on that link. It'll take you to the registration page. You might have to, that's the events. So you might just have to scroll down a little bit and you'll see it coming up on Wednesday, and then any other events that are coming up. So, and again, in the 4 core functions of business, I want you to think of the 15 reasons why people will buy. And we don't have time to unpack all of this right now, but I want you to think about this in terms of why people will buy from you. People buy because they want to make money. They want to save money. They want to save time. They want to avoid effort. They want to escape pain, physical pain, emotional pain, money pain, whatever. Like, there's all sorts of pain in people's lives. The pain of uncertainty. They want more comfort. They want better health or less stress. They want to feel more love, gain praise, increase their status, especially increasing their status among people that they care about. They will buy for truth, especially if they have felt lied to in the past. They will buy for growth. It could be personal growth. It could be for spiritual growth. It could be any number of reasons. They will buy for novelty just because something is true, or I'm sorry, just because something is new, rather. They will buy to feel like they're more in control or more certainty, and they will buy to feel like they're in contribution. That's that even belonging to a tribe a lot of times is that. Okay. So I think Lauren put up on the, yep, that's the events lead. Yep. Thank you. I appreciate it. So she put up the link to the lead generation multiplier. So in terms of lead generation, everything needs to support your lead generation function. Everything. Because the reality is you can have the best, most efficient business. You can be a paragon of virtue. You could have your sales techniques so dialed in, you could sell ice to Eskimos and voting booths to Castro and still starve. And that is the unfortunate reality. Because you have people who are can have an inferior product to yours, and they're going to outsell you because they understand the lead generation game. So you can never take your foot off the gas when it comes to lead generation. You just can never do it. And let me make a point on this before I move on. In terms of the lead generation function, that lead generation function never ever stops, even after they buy, especially after they buy. You know why? Because people who have bought from you in the past are likely to buy from you again. Even you're like thinking, well, what if I sell roofs, or what if I sell cars where they're not going to need a new one for 5, 10, or 15 years, or if they get into a car wreck? Yeah, but the point is that they may refer you. Or what if they want an additional car or a new car, or they need a roof on a summer house, or they need a roof on a rental property, or whatever. You don't know what they have, and you don't know who they know. So why would you just give that up because you sold them one thing? That's very myopic thinking, and I want to invite you to change that. Let's look at sales. Sales is what continues the conversation that's started by the lead generation function. So you have to think about this, is that it winds its way through lead generation to sales, which just continues the conversation from lead generation. It understands effective selling is about finding solutions, not holding someone's head underwater until they say yes. So I have a whole sales training course as well. I'm going to be running that next week, but I got to put that link up there. So again, keep an eye on Eventbrite. Once you're done through the sales function, then it goes to the operational function. And generally, if you're going to get stuck, this is where you get stuck. You get stuck in the operational function. And, if you're a roofer, you do roofing. If you're a plumber, you do plumbing. If you're a baker, you do baking, right? This is where you get stuck. You get stuck in the operational function. You get stuck in fulfillment. And finally is the accounting function. And generally, if you're going to ignore something, you're going to ignore the accounting function. And that, I'm just telling you, there's no judgment here, but I have a degree in accounting, and I have said that exact thing. Like, well, I got more money in my bank account this month than last month. I must be doing okay. And I'm just telling you that you cannot ignore the accounting function, because you can't possibly be strategic if you don't know where your money is, if you don't know how your money is landing. So think about it. Are all these the same skill set? Lead generation, sales, operations, accounting? Obviously not, right? This is why you need good people. And you need good people because they all matter. They all matter, and they all matter for different reasons. And when you're bringing people into your organization, you want to make sure that they match up with your core values. And that's why you need to have them defined, right? Having that defined set of core values, it allows you to interview better. It allows you to hire better. It allows you to be a better coach and counselor for them. It allows you to terminate a lot easier. Hey, man, you're just not in line with our core values. No disrespect. It's nothing personal, but I do need to move on because you just don't align, and that's all right. Let them go somewhere else where they do align. It sets the tone for meetings. The core values set and define the company culture, which I talked about earlier, and it unbelievably raises the level of personal commitment when the core values are defined. Now, the other thing is you have to stop and think about this, is that you're not the only person making decisions in your organization. You're not the only role model. This is why you want to make sure, if you're going to be developing leaders in your organization, you have to stop and think about this for a second and go, wait a minute. If I'm going to be developing leaders in my organization, it's really going to be important that I give them the compass heading, the true north for people to make decisions by when I'm not around. And that's exactly what core values does. So again, I made that point before, but You don't necessarily want the people with the strongest personalities to be running the show when you're not around, or if that person is you, what happens when you're not around? That's why core values is so important. It's also a component of realizing that when you want to grow, you can either grow by addition or you can grow by multiplication. And when you grow by addition, that's just when you hire a file clerk. That's just when you hire someone to answer the phones, and you will grow by addition. But when you're growing by multiplication, that's when you bring in other leaders. Because when you bring in other leaders or you develop other leaders, guess what they bring with them? They bring all the people that they have had an impact on prior to coming to your organization, or people that they're developing because they're having a much bigger impact. So this is why, if you think about it, the best networkers always say, oh, you got a problem? Yeah, I got a guy for that. I got a gal for that. So if you want to grow quickly, if you're looking to scale, and this is about growing quickly and growing purposefully and growing it where it's not going to be something that's going to metastasize into something horrible, you want to grow by multiplication. And if you want to grow quickly, bring in leaders. That's how you grow by multiplication. So we've talked about the first 4 items here. Let's land the plane on the resources. Hopefully this was helpful for you. If you are looking for some free resources and you are a Facebook kind of person, this is a webpage that we have. It's a Facebook group. If you'd like to go in there, you can, Lauren will put up the link to that. And just don't be a jerk. It will specifically ask you if you're a jerk, because if you're a jerk, you will not be allowed in. So I know I'm trying to make a joke of that, but we are lighthearted, but we're hardworking, and there are a lot of folks who are in that room that really take their businesses seriously, but they also like to have a little bit of fun. So this is the book I mentioned it earlier. If you would like a signed copy, if you are in the United States domestically and you'd like a signed copy of this for cheaper than on Amazon right now, I think it's priced at $35 on Amazon. It is definitely cheaper than that. And I will give you a bonus 30-minute one-to-one coaching session. But here's the thing. If you can also buy those guides that are on there, those 4 guides, if you'd like to get all 4, there's guides around lead generation, sales, strategic one sheets, and accounting. If you want all 4 of those guides, you can buy those as well. And you can get everything on there. Lauren went ahead and posted that in the room. If you guys have any questions, feel free to go ahead and type in any questions. I'm going to go ahead and I will stop the recording. I don't think I can stop the recording right now, but I will edit this part out if anybody has any questions. If not, we will land the plane. I'm going to take a sip of my water. All right. You're welcome, Lauren. Thank you. Thank you for showing up today. All right. I think we are in good shape. All right. Well, thank you for your time today. I do appreciate it, and I'll look to see you in future trainings. Have a great rest of your day. See you next time.